Summer heat and humidity, or as I like to call it, the humidity, is covering a good portion of the Northeast. And the heat wave, this new heat wave, is going to peak tomorrow with temperatures approaching the century mark. It'll be so hot that you'll be hearing music, just like we're hearing now. All that and more on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. 631-756-1125 is the telephone number. And pretty soon it'll be the fall, and you might be remulching or making your yard look good from whatever damage it's gotten from the summer heat. Well, they still got plenty of mulch, and don't forget they also have everything you need if a tropical storm or a hurricane were to threaten, and you need a generator, you need batteries, you need a new pump to pump out water. It's all there at Omni at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. 631-756-1125, the phone number, and the website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
Yes, it certainly is. I assume the red shirt is because you are thinking heat. You're thinking hellfires. You're thinking demonic. I don't
No,
know.
actually not. It's just simply because it's Wednesday.
Okay, what's the connection with Wednesday and being red? Oh, yes. It's Wednesday.
Yes.
Wednesday. Well, welcome
Guess
to
what day it
yes.
is?
Well, welcome everybody to the Joe and Joe Weather Show. If you're new to the Joe and Joe Weather Show, I'm Joe Chaffee, and to my left is Joe Rayo, and Joe gets top billing, and we'll leave it at that.
I do.
Yeah. Well, we don't know which Joe gets top billing because it's Joe and Joe. So we each
I'm
we each get top
I'm a
billing.
member of Local 12, Villain Thieves and Scoundrels Union.
Yes. Voting stalling. Welcome to everybody on
Yeah.
the chat board tonight. It's good to see everybody, the regulars on, and their deep conversations that they get into before the show. And we also want to thank Robert Russo, who was an early super chat hit tonight. Thank you, Robert. So here we are, and we've got tomorrow, which is going to, I think tomorrow, the best way to describe being outside, it's as if you're inside a hot sponge, because the dew points are going to be utterly ridiculous. They're going to be up above 70 just about everywhere, and they might even get to 72 or 73 in places. And you're going to have temperatures running, except for, say, the south shore of Long Island, the immediate Jersey shore, once the sea breezes kick in, the east end of Long Island, those water exposed locations where it still will probably get above 90 before they come to a grinding halt. But there are going to be a lot of areas tomorrow, Joe, that are going to be pushing toward 100 degrees. Now, we know Newark will probably get there. We know that it'll probably be about 3 or 4 degrees higher than everybody else, but it is what it is when your thermometer's on a runway. And there'll be other places too. We don't want to forget southeastern New England, because Boston, this is one of these setups where it's actually going to be a little hotter a little bit further to the north. So areas in and around Boston, for example, are going to see temperatures up around 100.
Yep, it's going to be a toasty. Tomorrow's actually going to be the probably going to be the pinnacle, so to speak, the hottest day that we will see all of this week. We've been building toward this, and as you just said, Joe, with the high dew points, the heat indices tomorrow are likely to be somewhere in like 105, 110 range. So it's going to be a tough day to be out and about for even a short length of time tomorrow. So my strong advice to you is that if you don't have to go anywhere, and if you have access to air conditioning or at least a strong fan, that's where you should stay, and that's where you should be for much, if not all, of the day tomorrow.
And I'd also think that it's probably going to be the hottest of, say, the next 4 days. Would you go along with that assessment?
Yeah, as I said, tomorrow looks like it'll be the pinnacle, and then It'll still be very warm to hot Friday into the weekend, but it just simply will not be what we're going to be experiencing for the day tomorrow. Tomorrow, again, is going to be the peak. The peak.
The pinnacle,
Yes.
the apex, the zenith.
The nadir.
Yes, the
There's a
Ralph
word.
Nader. That's a
Actually, I just realized that's a great word for Wordle. Nadir. Nadir. Nadir.
yeah. Well, you know
Would
what
that
they
work? Yeah.
you know what they had yesterday. It was, and I got it on the fifth try. Coily, Coyly. That's not a word that's used very often.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever.
Now they're digging down into the Funkin' Wagnalls dictionary to try to find words that you don't usually or don't often use, or
Yeah,
words that were more applicable maybe for the early part of the 20th century, but are still considered to be words.
that's
So,
right. I'm on an 80-day winning streak, so I'm hoping that it continues. Gotten the last. I'm sorry, not 80. 70. I'm on a 70 day winning streak.
okay,
I just thought I'd point that out.
alrighty,
All right, so you know what? I got the high temperature forecast maps set up for tomorrow, so I thought maybe we'd start with those. And let me bring it up on the screen here. So Joe Rayo, by the way, is monitoring the chat board. So if you have anything uh, to say, an opinion to express, or a question to ask, by all means, put it on the chat board, and hopefully we will get to it. But these are the forecast Weather Service highs, and you see that everybody from central Pennsylvania to southeastern New England in the 90s, and you've got this sort of orange, darker yellow or orange shading that is showing up in and around Philadelphia, Trenton, New York City. You've got in those areas, that's where you have that shot for hitting 100. Also, by the way, north of Route 84 up the Hudson Valley, there's that darker orange shading there. So they'll probably, maybe with the wind direction the way it is a little bit of downsloping that's going on, and that probably adds a couple of degrees to the heat. So don't be surprised if we see areas up in the Hudson Valley get close to 100 degrees, and also in and around the Boston area. I've just got some close-ups here just to point out. If you notice on Long Island, the numbers are closer to 90. And I'm thinking back, Joe, to that very hot day last week where temperatures got to, I think, 101 in Newark, and it was upper 90s everywhere. I believe Islip on that day only got to about 91 or 2, and then it just shut off because the wind was south southwest, and the temperature just stopped going up at around noontime, and it just sort of stayed there in the upper 80s, middle to upper 80s on the east end. Low 90s right along the Connecticut coast. If you're lucky enough to go to Block Island, they only have a forecast high tomorrow of 77, but Montauk's going to push 88, which is, I don't know if you've ever been. Have you ever been out to Montauk on a really, really hot day? Because
no, I've been to Montauk, but not on a very hot day. I tell you, the last time I was at Montauk and they climbed up the lighthouse and looked out, that was about a couple of days before we had a hurricane offshore, Hurricane Luis. And I guess I can go back and look at the record and see when Luis occurred, but that was the last time I was out that way. So
I've been out there on a hot day, and in spite of the fact that it's surrounded by water on almost all sides, it's surprising how hot it can get at Montauk in the height of the summer. Meanwhile, also in North Jersey, so areas in northeastern New Jersey, in places in Bergen County, in Essex, Union, Hudson. Those areas could probably get close to 100. The Weather Service has got 98s there, but I think there's enough room here for a 2-degree error. And then you start to go down further into New Jersey. We've got South Jersey and southeastern Pennsylvania, where we're looking at 96 for Trenton, Philadelphia 98, Wilmington 96. So in that urban corridor there, in the Route 1 corridor, it wouldn't shock me at all if somebody winds up getting to the century mark. Temperatures a little bit lower right along the New Jersey shore, again, with the wind parallel to the beach. The beach tomorrow on the Jersey shore should be a pretty good place to be. Middle 90s in southeastern and south central Pennsylvania around Lancaster and toward Harrisburg and down into Maryland and Delaware. Actually, the numbers come down a little bit. 92 for Dover and Delaware. They do have a 97 for Baltimore. And I think it's also middle 90s around the Washington, D.C. area. And this is what I was talking about with respect to up in New England. 96 at Boston, but I'm not sure what what the city marker is where it's got the 99. But I wouldn't be surprised if there were some 100-degree prints in here, and also in a strip running up the Connecticut River Valley, you could see temperatures well up into the 90s to near 100. And of course, it's cooler down as you headed toward Cape Cod, with temperatures generally in the in the 80s and maybe even the lower 80s. So it'll certainly feel a lot better there. But again, hot everywhere you go in the Northeast. And I don't even see much. We're going to get one of these weather fronts that's going to come through, try to come through on Friday night, but it completely falls apart. And therefore, there's no. At least we got a slight humidity relief today from yesterday's weather front that went by. The one that's coming through Friday is going to fall apart. The dew points on Saturday are going to be near 70 again, so there's going to be no humidity relief with that weather front going by.
Yeah, too bad. When you get, and you only need a few days to get used to the extreme heat. And so when there's even a slight dip in the humidity or a slight dent in the dew point, you actually do feel it. I did feel it this afternoon, along with the fact that we got up to 92 where I was. But yeah, it looks like that system on Friday night just literally is going to disintegrate before it has a chance to do anything or much of anything. So grin and bear it, folks. It looks like this is going to be the story for a while.
Yeah, and also from the standpoint of thunderstorm activity, I don't know that we're going to see very much. I don't think we're going to see much of anything tomorrow. Tomorrow evening, maybe in Pennsylvania, maybe up in the Catskills, you might see a couple of thunderstorms. But as they start to move east, they're going to pretty much fall apart after 8 or 9 o'clock. And Friday, there'll probably be some scattered thunderstorms around, but I'm not looking for any kind of severe weather out of this, at least for the time being. I'm going to not go down that particular road. And over the weekend, yeah, I don't know if you did. I threw in the chance that there could be a scattered shower or thunderstorm on Saturday, and then maybe again on Sunday. But um, I think the vast majority of folks are probably not going to see much of anything from that respect.
Yeah, you would have to hope for something to, as the late great Tex Antoine would say, percolate. Something pop up here and there for a little bit of relief, but there doesn't seem to be very much of that coming. It's worth mentioning to covers oneself, especially since the weekend, that there might be a shower here and there, or maybe a pop-up storm. But for the most part, don't count too highly on that because the odds are, I think, actually, if they of the two weekend days, I give a slightly greater chance for maybe a shower or storm on Saturday
Yeah,
versus Sunday. But
yeah,
again,
I agree.
it's only because the corpse, so to speak, of the residual effects of the old front is still in the vicinity, and that just might be enough to pop something later on Saturday. But it'll be pretty well past us by Sunday. So just
I
only
think
a small
that's
chance.
exactly correct. I think that's exactly it. The corpse of that weather front is going to give that better chance for Saturday than for Sunday. Meanwhile, we still have clear. I mean, I think it was mostly cloud free today from Maine down into Virginia, other than a few patchy passing clouds here and there. It's clear this evening from that point down into northern North Carolina. We've got a bit of a sea breeze front in action here along the North and South Carolina coast, and you can see a flare up of thunderstorms bulging to the northwest. They're getting close to me. I don't know if I'm going to see anything. Also, if you look on the lower right portion of your screen, you're going to see what you think might be a big storm, but it's not. That's a cold upper low. It was there yesterday, and it's pretty much in the same spot today. And of course, cold upper lows in that position create hostile environments for tropical cyclone development. And if you want to see the results of that cold upper low, take a look at the clouds in the Caribbean. They're going from west to east in the higher levels of the atmosphere. That strong upper airflow or wind shear, if any kind of tropical system, which is a low level system, it moves into that area of shear, it would get ripped apart. So that means uh, nothing can develop while you have strong westerly winds, at least in the Caribbean. Meanwhile, in the Gulf of Mexico, we have a lot of. This is also an upper low. We have a lot of disorganized showers and thunderstorms here in the central and northeastern Gulf, north central and northeastern Gulf of Mexico. But here too, we've got. If you look at the clouds, they're all sort of going in all sorts of different directions. They're moving from north to south. The clouds in the western Gulf are moving from south to north. They're all actually almost turning anticyclonically here than anything else. Uh, you always want to watch disturbed weather this time of year when it gets into the Gulf of Mexico like this because sometimes it can develop into something, but the upper air conditions are simply not there. And then we've got this weather front, Joe, that's approaching. The one that's going to be getting here for Friday, really blossoming out tonight with showers and thunderstorms from Michigan on south and west through Indiana, Illinois, and into Missouri.
Yeah, and Joe, you just reminded me. I forgot the name of the system. I think it was Colin. I think it was Colin. Remember, Colin developed like the day before. The Hurricane Center had said only like a 20% chance of anything developing out of
Or a
that, and then all of a
ten
sudden,
percent I thought it was.
and 10% or whatever, and the next day, all of a sudden, we're dealing with a tropical cyclone. So you're right, especially now with the warm, very warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Even if there's a slightly favorable situation for some kind of development, it just might do that. And also, I guess it depends also on the forecaster, the guy who's or the gal who's in charge of, making the call as to whether or not there is something out there. So I'm not saying that we are going to see something. It's been a long stretch now where we've had no named storms in July, but uh, that was because, as we've been saying, July is a slack month. We're into August now, and we're probably going to see things start cranking up. Maybe not immediately, but sometime in the next week or two.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk. We'll get through this weather. I want to just talk a little bit more about the tropics when we get a little bit deeper into the show. The radar is quiet from Maine all the way down into northern North Carolina, but you can see the showers and storms that have bubbled up in South Carolina inland, and also into Georgia. They're popping up all around me, Joe, in northeast Georgia. I don't know. I might wind up getting a downpour at some point because they look like they're pivoting westward. Also seeing some clusters of showers and storms in the great state of Florida, not statewide, kind of patchy. Also, with all those clouds that you saw on the satellite, not really producing a whole lot when it comes to showers and storms in the central Gulf states. There are some patches along the Gulf Coast and also in western Louisiana. Actually, not much of anything going on in and around New Orleans. Some stuff offshore. And then we move up north, and you can see there's a pretty active line of storms with some severe thunderstorm warnings popping up in that northeast southwest oriented line from going into Canada, from Toronto to Detroit, down into northern Indiana, northwestern Ohio, and then cutting further south into south central Illinois, in and around St. Louis, and a few cells back a little bit further west from St. Louis. And that line slowly moving to the east. It's hard to believe that as active as that line looks and as impressive as it looks, that we're going to wind up getting very little out of it by the time it gets here. But it loses all its upper air support by the time it reaches the coast.
Right, right. And with no support, boom. That's that immediately drains away any of the potential for enough atmospheric energy and enough moisture to get it all the way uh, as far east as our area to produce something substantial. But again, this is not a total wipeout. There may be just enough to see a scattering of showers and storms around Friday. Again, maybe on Saturday. Maybe again, we said that's with the corpse of this system, whatever's left over, and then Sunday, still a chance we might see a shower or storm, but don't hold your breath. It's not likely to happen.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. The Storm Prediction Center, that area from Michigan down to Missouri, is an area of slight risk of severe weather. We actually have a severe thunderstorm watch that's been put up. It was issued at about 5 o'clock this afternoon. It's a weird watch though. It's very narrow. I'm gonna just bring it up. Um, I guess Joe, there was a time when they would put these watches up, and sometimes you wouldn't see anything out of them. And I know every once in a while they do seem to do the same thing. But take a look at this watch. Look how small. I don't know if this. I got to go back and look to see if they added this. This looks like they may have added it because they've got other watch boxes. So I take it back. But they did add a bunch of counties there in Indiana, well north and west of Indianapolis and into northwest Ohio. But they still got these watch boxes up uh, to the west of those, and it looks like, at least from the radar, that pretty soon those storms will have played out through that area, and those watches will be whittled away. But let's go back to the risk areas. Also, small area of marginal risk in southeastern Arizona with the monsoon producing some showers and some thunderstorms there. For tomorrow, we had no severe. Looks like they updated this to a marginal risk. They got a marginal risk from western Pennsylvania through Ohio into Kentucky and southeastern Indiana, also through a small portion of central Montana. Otherwise, much of the east, except for coastal eastern New England, much of the east coast of the United States and across the Gulf states and the lower and middle Mississippi Valley are seeing, typical summer stuff. And then for the next day, they have
Yeah.
bless you. Oh boy, that was a
Thank you.
loud one. Um,
That came out of nowhere.
yeah, on the next day, which is Friday into Saturday, they've got no severe weather indicated in the east, just general thunderstorms pretty much from Maine to Florida, back to East Texas, and on up toward the Great Lakes. Marginal risk in parts of North and South Dakota and western Minnesota, and that's about it. Excuse me. And they have nothing, I tell you, nothing with respect to the long range. And we always like to see what WPC says with regards to rainfall amounts. So I am in the process of updating the maps here to see their new forecast, their new 7-day forecast. And this is actually day one, what you're looking at. So for tomorrow, they've got nothing. So even WPC is saying no, except for maybe a little bit of light stuff for a chance for a thunderstorm or two in eastern Pennsylvania and up the Hudson Valley, well north of Route 84. Here we go with Friday. Now, Friday, they do have some precip indicated, but it's mostly a quarter of an inch or less. There are some patches there that are showing up in Pennsylvania down through Ohio where they added that risk area where they're showing 3/4 of an inch to an inch, inch and a quarter. Saturday, this is ending Saturday evening. So Friday evening into Saturday, yeah, Friday evening into Saturday evening. They actually do have a quarter to a half an inch from west of Worcester. Draw a line, say from Portland, Maine to Worcester to New York City to Philadelphia. From there north and west, they've got a quarter to a half, and they even got a little patch there of a half to 3/4, two little patches of a half to 3/4 down into northeastern Virginia. I suppose if they seem to be a little more bullish than the GFS is and some of the other models with regards to Saturday. And here's your 7-day total here, and you'll notice upstate New York, nothing. Most of Vermont and New Hampshire and Maine, nothing. Most of north central and northwestern PA, 0. I mean, look how that's day 7. I'm sorry, my fault. My fault. There we go. Now it makes more sense. It's like that doesn't seem right. Here's your 7-day totals. So we've got half an inch to about an inch and a half uh, patches in western New Jersey, eastern PA, down into Delaware and Maryland, and northeastern Virginia. A little bit more in upstate New York, a little bit more in northern New England, and a lot in the Ohio Valley, Joe. They're going after Kentucky again over the next 7 days with some pockets of 2 to 3 inches or more, and also in the central and southern Appalachians, and also very bullish in the Southwest. I really hope that they don't get much more rain. Although, Joe, go back to the radar. That let's see. I just want to go back to that radar shot. Yeah, I mean that line goes down into Missouri and it's moving eastward, so that's going to it holds together. That's going to clip parts of northern Kentucky overnight and tomorrow.
Yeah, why can't they bring some of that moisture up here to my house? This is today marked day 16, where I had nothing more than I've seen nothing more than a few drops. We had again just 16 days ago we had about 7/10 of an inch of rainfall, and we've had very little since. Large patches of brown on my both on my front and my back lawn, and the one good thing about the dry weather, which I might point out, is that there was a time a few weeks ago where if you looked on my lawn before I mowed it, it looked like somebody had dropped little flakes of snow on it. Those were white clover that literally covered my entire lawn. But I guess now, because of the lack of any heat, lack of any wet weather, and the very uh, dry and hot conditions, the clover just gave up. I don't see any clover anymore. I see a lot of brown where I used to see clover, but there's no clover anymore. So I could use a little bit of that moisture from Kentucky, but again, a scattering of shower and storm activity maybe for Friday, and possibly on Saturday, maybe, and just a small, if not downright slight chance on Sunday. That's all we can hope for up here over the next few days to come.
Well, I have the connections detailing up on the screen, our teleconnections, because I thought maybe I thought it would be a good thing to look at today because there are some changes in the longer term that the models are hinting at. The Pacific North America index, which right now is heading negative and going to bottom in the next couple of days, 1 standard deviation negative, quickly reverses and goes to neutral. And then after around the 10th or 11th of August, Joe, it actually goes positive. So that's telling us that the pressure changes are happening where we're seeing higher pressures developing in the western part of the United States and maybe some troughing in the eastern part of the United States. And the NAO, interestingly enough, which right now is positive, it's actually as positive as it has been all summer. You have to go back to before June 15th to find the North Atlantic oscillation readings as high as they are now, which is only about 1 standard deviation above the mean. But here too, we're peaking and going toward the neutral line and almost negative around the 15th of August. So that's going to kind of favor maybe more troughing in the eastern part of the United States. Come mid-month, maybe some kind of a slight shift in the pattern where the heat ridge in the middle of the country moves to the west, and that Canadian uh, jet stream pattern that was busy for the first part of the summer comes back with some strength rather than how it is now, where we're just kind of getting these weather fronts that are coming by with just a little bit of dew point relief at most and really not much temperature relief. So the teleconnections are kind of hinting, and I think, Joe, that may correspond. That change, if this verifies, I think that's going to also have implications with regards to tropical cyclone development getting underway in the Atlantic. It's got to get started sooner or later. So
Yes,
this to me is pointing to that.
I agree. I agree. There will be some changes by mid-month. For us, changes for the better. Hopefully, more in the way of somewhat cooler airflow, and hopefully lower dew points and more comfortable conditions. But at the same token, also flipping toward a more favorable weather pattern for tropical development over the open water, over the Atlantic Basin and the Caribbean. Again, probably toward the middle and latter part of this month.
All right, so I'm going to
You
use the
gotta take the
12.
good with the bad.
Yes, I'm gonna use the 12Z GFS and not the 18Z. And the reason why I'm going to use the 12Z GFS, Joe, is because just like yesterday, the 18Z basically has us in 90-degree highs for the next 16 days. It just
Right.
it just builds the ridge in the across the entire United States, and it doesn't really recognize what's going on in Canada. It did it yesterday. The off cycle run, something about the 18Z run that it keeps doing it, because even the 6Z run didn't do that. The 6Z was kind of in line with what the 0 and the 6 and the 12 did. So I'm going to toss the 18Z out today and go back to the 12. And you could see what's happening here. Now, this is Monday. We had a shortwave trough moving through, and now, of course, as a new one digs into the northern plains, we're getting into the heat for Thursday, and we've got that Atlantic ridge building back to the coast. The heat ridge is sitting down in New Mexico, West Texas. It's kind of on the flattish side because of what's going on in Western Canada. You have an upper low in southwestern Canada. You have a very strong upper low in Hudson Bay. And we do see, again, a weather front that basically falls apart because that, you're looking at this point this evening. This is at 2 o'clock this afternoon. That's a pretty robust trough. But the problem is it lifts way up to the northeast, and it never has any real impact here. So that's why it's going to fall apart. The ridge in the Atlantic is going to be strong going into Saturday and the weekend and into early next week. But then, I don't know how you feel about this. There is a short wave that's swinging through on Monday. So there's another weather front for Monday, Tuesday. And then it does show some troughing in the east later next week, with some kind of upper low dropping down into eastern Canada. I don't know if you buy this, but I mean this would at least break the any kind of 90-degree heat. This would break it, and more importantly, the ridge is going to the west. The ridge in the western part of the United States is kind of taking a foothold in the west, and that reflects that PNA that I talked about, that the Pacific North America Index going positive. Ooh, what's that? I didn't even
That,
know. I didn't even notice that, Joe.
are you looking at that thing down in Florida?
Yeah, 216. Yeah, it took something just offshore over toward Nova Scotia.
Take a look at it by 264 and 270.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Oh, I didn't even notice this. Yes, I'm just noticing it now because actually this is the first look that I've had on this model this evening. But yeah, look at
Now,
that.
is that possibly for real, you think? And you know
Well,
what? Look at the 18Z. The 18Z, it's gone.
because the
It's
18Z the 18Z has just basically got a continuation of the same pattern we've been in, which would say that the tropics never wake
right.
up. I don't buy I don't accept the idea that you're going to have this humongous east to west ridge where the entire nation is going to be on fire. I just don't think that's going to happen. The Canadian jet has been there all summer long. I mean, it's still there. Really, it's there now. It's just that it's retreated to the north. But this, a number of these model runs, the 0Z, the 6, the 12, giving you the idea that you're going to have, some more troughing in the east. And hey, if you look at what's going on, maybe something developing off the southeast coast of the United States is the logical place for something to develop, as opposed to what out in the tropical Atlantic where they still have dust issues.
Right.
I'm just
Well,
I'm just taking a look at this. Yeah, that's well. Look, something's got to pop somewhere along the line. It can't stay quiet forever. Yeah, the reason, by the way, it does go move up the East Coast. So let's also point out that The reason why it does this is because it's showing a shortwave near Lake Winnipeg that gets really wrapped up and moves into the Western Lakes. Who knows if that's real or not? That's the other thing. I mean, that could be something that's a lot weaker, or maybe it's oriented in a different sort of way. But I wouldn't put too much stock in this at the moment. It's too far out into the long range to get really too serious to get to even remotely interested in it at this point.
Well, we'll see, won't we?
Well, let's see what the European
Yes.
did the European do it. That's always the good thing to the thing to look at is to see if you've got some model confirmation. The European only goes out to 240, but the GFS does start to form it at 210. See, now the European's it's different. Yeah, it drops the trough in the eastern part of the United States, but here's that system over Lake Winnipeg that I just mentioned. Let me clean this up first so it's a little clearer. Here's the trough in the eastern part of the United States. This is what the GFS amplifies into the western lakes. You get something that forms off the southeast coast, maybe off an old frontal boundary or something. But the European doesn't really do anything with it, at least through day 10. So, and then I'm looking at the structure of the 500. This if something were to develop down here, it would get taken out way out to the east because the flow along the east coast is southwest from right along the coast, the trough axis right along the coast. So the European is not on the same page with the GFS at this time.
At this time. Yes. Yeah. Well, we'll see. Now, just getting back to the weekend outlook, I think that in terms of showers and scattered thunderstorms, or possible showers and scattered thunderstorms, I'm not sure if you agree with me on this. It would be the best chance would be, I think, from later Friday through Friday night. That might actually be the best time for hoping for any kind of significant or any kind of type of precipitation to occur, convective precipitation. And then we'll see that spill over into early Saturday, and then that will kind of flatten out, so to speak. And even though there'll still be a chance Saturday afternoon, I think the lion's share of precipitation will be from late Friday into early Saturday, and then from Saturday afternoon through the rest of the weekend, just a hit or miss, renegade shower or storm that may pop up, but more often than not, from Saturday afternoon through Sunday, it probably will be dry. So if you're hoping to get your flowers and your lawn watered down a bit, you got something, to keep your fingers crossed for. Again, later Friday into early Saturday, as that front kind of sags into our area with still some punch or some push or some strength to it, and then it just kind of shrivels up, if you will, during the early part of the day on Saturday, and then just leaves us in El Stico weather for the rest of the weekend into early next week.
Well, the GFS model run has some kind of agrees with your assessment overall. There's some scattered stuff tomorrow, inland New York State, uh, inland, in Pennsylvania, Northern Virginia, West Virginia, Southern Ohio into Kentucky. Got two little green dots, one east of Sandy Hook and one south of Islip, as far as that goes. And then Friday, it's a little more bullish from New York City southward. It's got a few clusters of stronger storms here. I don't know how real that is. So, yeah, you put them in for Friday. And then Saturday, as you said, the leftover corpse. Actually, even on this run, it didn't really do very much with the leftover corpse. It just has some scattered stuff throughout most of the east, the mid-Atlantic and southeast, but not much of anything at all up in the northeast. And then Sunday, yeah, I mean, widely scattered shower or thunderstorm after the heating of the day, because it is going to be hot and humid on Sunday. Here comes a front for Tuesday, which initially makes its approach Monday night, but then it gets hung up for a little while, and then it waits for Tuesday to come on through. We talked about this yesterday, that the GFS loves to rush fronts through, only to wind up being at least 12 and sometimes 24 hours later. So Tuesday looks like the day that we could see something more significant with showers and thunderstorms. And then it likes to hang up that front for a maybe. Joe, here's your hope if the 18C GFS is right, because the front gets hung up and a little wave develops on it, and there's actually some significant rain that comes in Tuesday night and Wednesday from that little wave. And even into Wednesday evening, some showers and thunderstorms. And then after that, it moves away and weather conditions improve toward the end of next week. So, again, it's pretty much the same story. There's not a whole lot
We can
in the
we can
short
always
range that's
hope that
different.
we could always hope, Joe, that by midweek of next week, as the this next disturbance moves on through, that by later next week, later Wednesday or Thursday of next week, it may actually turn the humidity actually may take a noticeable downturn and also a noticeable cool down, where temperatures, as I said, through it looks like Tuesday of next week will be in the upper 80s and 90s. We might actually be talking about low 80s on Wednesday, and maybe even a bit cooler and a bit less humid than that, and a bit breezier as well as we get into again the latter part of next week. So we could always hope.
Yes, David Fuller, a super chat hitter tonight, says he's going to Wildwood, New Jersey on Friday. So you may have some storms with that weather front at the end of the day, the way it looks. The weekend, probably Sunday a little better than Saturday, but Saturday, for the most part, may not be that bad. I'm going to say clouds and sun with a scattered shower or thunderstorm and temperatures well up into the 80s and probably back to 90 or better, at least away from the ocean anyway. Back to 90 or so, or low 90s on Sunday and into Monday. So for the most part, you should be okay. And Mark DiChiara letting me know that Waycross, Georgia, had heavy downpours earlier, and that's where he watches trains. Oh, how cool is that? Joe Rayo, Johnny Quest would like to know: will higher terrain cause some of these storms to form? Will they help? Where he is in northwestern Virginia.
Yeah, well, I always have felt that, especially during summertime, convection is more likely to take place over the higher terrain areas. I mean, you remember, Joe, growing up in the Bronx, we used to listen to WCBS News Radio 880 and or
Yes.
88. Now they're 880. They've added a zero. And Gordon Barnes, who was the guy in charge of weather back then at CBS in the 60s and 70s, and in the summertime, he was always saying chance for scattered showers and thunderstorms, especially north and west of New York City, over the hillier terrain areas. And that always seemed to be the case. So, in West Virginia, and West Virginia is a very hilly state with high terrain areas, certainly it would seem that if you're going to see any summertime pop-up storms, they certainly will be conducive to forming over the higher terrain regions. And especially in the summertime with all of this humidity, any one single cell probably is enough to bring down quite a bit of rain in a short little of time. Frequent lightning, loud thunder, you name it, you get it.
It's the frequently dangerous lightning that you have to worry about, as
Right.
opposed to the infrequently not so dangerous lightning. Oh, good Lord. Well, I always like that sort of stuff. Do you have a Briller Jeopardy tonight, or am I still doing the Mets stuff?
I think you may be still doing the Met stuff. I did not see anything from Mr. Briller on my end. I can take a check just to make sure.
Yes, and I'm gonna
Uh,
bring up the Mets thing.
no, I don't see anything from Mr. Briller, so I think you still are doing Mets thing here tonight.
All right, hang on a second. Uh,
And boy, what a day for the Mets. They were ahead 9-0 going into the bottom of the ninth inning against Washington, and they brought in a pitcher I never heard of before, and the pitcher on the first three pitches hit the first pitch home run, second pitch home run, third pitch base hit, fourth pitch base hit, and before this was all over, and they had to bring Seth Lugo in out of the bullpen to relieve this guy. And you always know that these pitchers, these new guys, they have those high numbers like number 65, number 70, number 80, or whatever like that. Before it was all over, said and done, the Mets finally won, but it wasn't 9-0. It was 9-5. And I think the Gary, Keith, and Ron were saying that if they got a couple of more, if the Nationals got a couple of more hits, they were going to have to bring in Diaz, their closer. And you see the 9-0 lead, and all of a sudden you see it start shriveling up there.
ugh.
Also, let's give a salute to and rest in peace to the late great
Vince Scully.
Vin Scully, who passed away yesterday. And 94, and he worked for the same team. He did Dodger baseball on the air for 67 years. And considering that I just turned 66, Joe, that's that blows you away that you would be doing the same thing for the same company every year, every single year for 67 years. Unbelievable.
Oh, he's a rare. I mean, he's a rare talent. Um, he was he was good at what he did. I mean, no doubt about it. And he was the voice of the Dodgers, as you said, for so many years. Yeah, it's hard to imagine going, that that long, but he was great at what he did. Unlike some of the announcers that they have these days doing some of these ball games, that's why I can't watch. I just can't
Well,
watch.
sometimes even Vin Scully would divert from, his usual stand. I mean, like, can I tell you now? My wife was watching right now. I told this at the dinner table tonight with to her and my daughter, and their eyes both rolled in the back. But this was a pun that Vin Scully and Vin Scully admits it was the worst pun that he ever said on the air in 67 years. You ready for this?
Go ahead.
It was back in the late 1950s when Joe Torre, we all know Joe, he was former manager of the Yankees and Mets for a good number of years, but he was a great ball player. And in the late 50s, he was playing against the Dodgers for the Milwaukee Braves. He was the catcher. And there was a foul tip, and it hit off of Joe Torre's throwing hand. And that must have hurt.
Yeah,
The
yes.
next night, Torre was not catching, he was at third base. And Vin Scully, taking note of that, says, if Joe Torre doesn't catch for the rest of his illustrious career, if he never goes behind the plate again, he'll be known from this day on as Chicken Catcher Torre.
Oh, oh, no, 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 no. Um,
Then have a safe trip. Oh dear. All right. So it's Mets tonight, or
yeah, it's Mets tonight. I'm just typing a message out to SG who wants to know about weather apps for England. And I'm responding. I really am not too familiar with weather apps. Actually, I'm not familiar at all. But we do have a person who's on the chat board from time to time, and from England that watches our show. So he would, I think, would be in a much better position to give you the answer to your question. But if he comes on when you're not here, I'm going to try to remember to ask him uh, myself, and then when I see you again, I will respond. So, Coin Pig, if you're watching this show, we need your help on something. So, uh, come back on and let us know what are good apps for England. Okay. All right. Let me get these questions here. Okay. The first question for tonight, Joe. The 1969 New York Mets won 100 regular season games en route to the National League East title. Which team did the Mets defeat in the NL Championship Series?
they swept the Atlanta Braves in 3 games.
That is
In those
correct.
days, it was best 3 out of 5, not 4 out of 7.
Okay. Who played second base in 1962 for 85 games?
Um, Mets second baseman in 1962. I'm not sure if it was the second baseman or the shortstop. Was it Ilio Chacon?
No. Who?
No. Rod Keneal?
Uh, not Rod Keneal. I mean, unless he went by a
Huh.
different name, but that sounds like that. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. It was my turn to seize.
Yeah.
Uh, he was acquired by the Mets in December 1961 from the Dodgers for Lee Walls, Willard Hunter, and and cash. Cash is always good. In 8 seasons
Yes.
with the Brooklyn and LA Dodgers, Mets, and Reds, he hit 259 with 87 home runs and 48 stolen bases.
I'm not sure. Gus Bell?
Nope, you've had 3 hits, so 3 strikes. Charlie Neal.
Charlie Neal. Yes. Yes. Okay.
Yes, yes. In the 1969 Mets had a very formidable pitching staff, which was the strength of the team. For the third year in a row, they inserted a rookie into the starting rotation as a mainstay of the staff. Who was that 1969 rookie pitcher who threw 233 innings that year?
He was from Arizona State, which was the baseball college. He was only a mere 22 years old, and his name was Gary Gentry, old Stoneface. He never, except I think during the when they were celebrating in the clubhouse after they won the divisional championship, he never seemed to break a smile. They called him Old Stoneface, Gary Gentry.
Gentry won 13 games as a rookie in 1969 and pitched to a 3.43 ERA. He was the winning pitcher in the division clinching game that season, posting a 6-0 shutout to the St. Louis Cardinals. He pitched the Mets through the 72 season before being traded to the Braves. He developed arm trouble and was out of baseball by 1975. By the way, just as a heads up, I am now getting one of those thunderstorms. It's actually gotten quite dark outside because I'm still a good half hour from, what time is it? 8:24. Yeah, I'm still a half hour from my sunset. So it's pretty dark and kind of windy. So just in case we drop out, just letting you know. The Mets were allowed to select designated players from lists submitted to the league office by all National League teams to fill their rosters. With their very first pick, the Mets selected a catcher. What was his name?
Oh, I know that it wasn't it was not Choo Choo Coleman. It was who
God.
was it? See, I used to know I realize now I'm getting up there because the I'm getting like brain lock. I know who you're talking about, and I also know that when Casey Stengel was asked why did you choose this guy as your very first choice, again he was a catcher, and Casey said without a catcher you get a lot of pass balls. Uh, 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 Joe, I bow my head in shame. I should know this. I knew it. It just doesn't. It's not just coming to me. So,
Hobie Landreth.
Hobie Landreth. How many people in your life have you ever met named Hobie?
None. None. And our last question tonight, Joe. Who gave up the first run in Mets history?
Who gave up the first run?
Yes.
It would have to be the first pitcher. First starting pitcher would be Roger Craig.
The starting pitcher for the Mets against the St. Louis Cardinals on April 11th, 1962, when they lost 11-4.
Yes.
Listen, I'm impressed because, but you're right. There was a time I'm getting at an age where, I'm not. I'm kind of the same. I don't stuff that I used to know like right away. Uh, it just gets stuck. It's that the hourglass, the circle of death just keeps turning round and round
Right.
and round.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's kind of where my brain is at right now. Some days are better than others. And it didn't help being on some of the medication that I was on because uh, the some of it kind of made me loopy, and I would remember even less. So, but I'm not doing. I'm off of that stuff now. So I'm not having those loopy moments like I used to. I still have loopy moments. Oh, by the way, I want to mention because I'm now in season 8, episode 6 of Perry Mason. So I'm getting very close to the last season, but I did see an episode last night where June Lockhart was on, and she got arrested for murder. Now there was an episode in season 7 where Mark Goddard was on, And he just had a
Oh,
birthday, by
Major
the way.
West.
Yeah, he just had his, I think, his
Major West.
77th birthday. But Mark Goddard was on. So there are two Lost in Space alumni that I caught on Perry Mason. I just thought I'd share that with you. June Lockhart looked very nice. You know, classy lady. June Lockhart is because she's still with us. I think she just turned 97 this year. She had a birthday, I think, a month ago. Happy birthday, June Lockhart.
And incidentally, in season 7, they still listed on the credits, I think, Collins, Ray Collins,
Yeah,
as,
yes, and the thing,
as
he was actually, Ray Collins has a great history. If you look, it goes all the way back to the 30s, and he was part of the Orson Welles theater group that Orson Welles had, and he was in Citizen Kane. Ray Collins was, and he was in a number of movies, some very good ones too. The Best Years of Our Lives, and some others. But he was well liked and had a very good reputation for being one of these people that could read a script and like instantly know his lines. But as he got older, his memory began to deteriorate, and it got to a point where he wasn't able to do it anymore. But he was so loved by the people, the cast, and by the producers that they left his name on the credits all through the series, regardless of whether he was in the episode or not.
right.
Which I think is just a great thing. That's not
Yep.
something you see done anymore. So anyway, what else? There was something. Oh, I wanted to mention too because this weekend you had three people die. Two of them got a lot of attention. Bill Russell, the basketball great Bill Russell. Now I can't remember who the other person was, but that person also got a lot of attention. But I'm having one of those moments.
Uhura.
But Pat, yeah, oh yes, right, from Star Trek,
Right.
Lieutenant Uhura. Nichelle, I forgot her last name because I'm not a Star Trek fan, but she was very well known. But Pat Carroll died, and that I saw you put up her obit. You put up something about Pat Carroll, and she. You might know her if you if any of you have ever took your daughter years ago to Disney's The Little Mermaid. She was the voice of Ursula. I thought she was one of the best evil Disney characters that they've ever had. I really loved the way she characterized Ursula.
Well, she was, back in the 50s and early 60s, she was on Make Room for Daddy with Danny Thomas. I also remember her as one of the three stepsisters or two
Yes,
stepsisters
from Cinderella.
in uh, in Cinderella,
Right.
Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, which was on for a few years on CBS. And then later she had guest appearances. She appeared with Mary Tyler Moore on the Mary Tyler
Yes.
Moore show. I think they shared a room.
A hospital room, and she didn't like Mary.
Right.
And
Exactly.
Mary had an issue with that because
Right.
everybody likes Mary, but she didn't like Mary.
And
It actually was
it's
quite a funny episode.
it's a funny thing. If you looked at Pat Carroll's career, she was by far and away very popular, very well known, or whatever. But that was in the 50s and 60s, and then with time, her star began to fade, and as it began to fade, Bill Russell became a legendary basketball star in the NBA with the Boston Celtics. His star, he went supernova, if you will, and passed Pat Carroll, I guess, in terms of overall recognizability or whatever. And then, of course, there was also Michelle, I forget her last name as well, who played Uhura on Star Trek, and
Nichols.
her star began to rise. And so both of them kind of surpassed Pat Carroll, left Pat Carroll in their dust, so to speak. So that and Pat Carroll, I guess, had a recent upsurge with doing the voice of Ursula.
Yes.
But you didn't see her; you just heard her. But she might have gotten some. But I'm worried this coming Sunday on on that great morning news program, CBS Sunday Morning. At about 40 minutes into the show, they always have a short sequence of people who have passed away during the past week. And I'm concerned that, now with Vin Scully, I'm concerned that they may not have any room to salute Pat Carroll. I hope that that's not going to be the case. But, you say to yourself, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die when like two or three other people who are very famous, far more famous than I was, and I'll be forgotten. Somebody somebody said once, I think it was in Jim Bouton's book Ball Four, that there was like a potent thunderstorm and the aircraft carrying the Yankees was going through the thunderstorm. The plane was getting battered around, and everybody was real concerned about that. That maybe the plane will crash. What's going to happen if the plane crashes? What will the newspapers say the next day? New York Yankee team killed in terrible plane crash. And then somebody on the plane said, no, that's not going to be the story. In the Daily News, the New York Post are probably going to have Mickey Mantle and 24 others killed.
Yeah.
It all depends on your star, how brightly you're shining.
Exactly. Keith James the second asked, I think, a very legitimate question. He says, "Why do the tropics have to heat up? Can't we have a season with little or no storms, like a warm winter with no snow?" And the answer to that is, yeah, we could certainly have a season with few storms. If you look back in history, there were some years where there was only 3 or 4 for the whole season. But those usually, when you look back at the sort the hemispheric scale of what's going on. In those years, you had were mostly El Nino years, and in those El Nino years, those are the years where we see uh, fewer storms. Doesn't necessarily mean that you don't see a powerful storm in that. And I think you brought up, Joe, 1992 with Andrew, which was a Category 5, in a year where I think there were only 5 or 6 named storms for the whole season. But so yeah, there certainly could be a season where there are few storms. But when you look at the broad pattern with the La Nina raging instead of El Nino, with the La Nina out there, that favors tropical cyclone development in the Atlantic. And if you look at some of the years where you did have a La Nina, there are examples where you don't have much activity going into the month of August. You're maybe on the third storm or the fourth storm, you've had maybe 3 or 4 or 5 storms ahead of it, and then you had that quiet, you get this quiet July, and then all of a sudden, at some point during the month of August, this thing started exploding in the tropics, and you have 3, 4, 5 named storms within the matter of about a week to 10 days. So the climatology and the state of the La Nina would suggest that the tropics will wake up. Now, there might be other factors in play. I don't know. But for now, that's what we know. So we kind of go with what we know. And if it turns out we're wrong, then we look back and figure out the reason why in post analysis. And then we've learned something
As
new.
I said yesterday, on average, after usually very quiet month of July, on average from August 1st to the end of the tropical storm season, you should add at least 12 storms to whatever you've already have seen up until that point in the summertime. So we've only seen in the Atlantic 3 storms, 3 named storms. So add another 12, that would make it 15. That would take us down to Nicole, and if that would be the case, that would be the name that we would be seeing rolling around either in late October or as we move into November. So there's still quite a bit of activity out there that is, again, typically or on average due to flare up. But yeah, there's been some years, not necessarily connected to ENSO, El Nino or La Nina, but also in the amount of Saharan dust out
Right.
over the ocean. It also helps to tamp down, if you will, the amount of tropical activity. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I think, as we've been saying, Joe, it looks like once we get to about the middle and latter part of August, things will start revving up in terms of the tropics in the Atlantic and Caribbean waters.
And on that note, I think it's time to say goodnight. And the Joe and Joe Weather Show brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town and everything you need to get through this upcoming hurricane season or maybe get your yard ready for the fall. The website is
OmniTrueValue.com. It's so nice to be able to say that again after a few months sabbatical. That we're
yeah,
getting back into the swing of things here.
absolutely. It didn't feel right not having Omni here on a nightly basis. So now they are back. And we will be back tomorrow night at 7:30 Eastern Time. So see you then. Good night, everybody.
Bye bye.